Well, FNB says the fuel price increase will have a severe impact on spending patterns. Let's discuss. We're joined by the Head of Information and Marketing at FNB Agriculture, Dawie Maree. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Maree. We already have high unemployment, many people below the food poverty line, so it's hard to ask how bad this will be now because we're already in a bad situation. How will it get worse?
Good evening, Francis, and thank you for having me. I think the concern is definitely on the food price inflation, on the back of the fuel price increases. And obviously, as you've mentioned, the impact of the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, which will result in higher international grain prices. So just going back to the fuel price, fuel is a non-discretionary expense for consumers. We have to travel to go to work, to drop our kids at school, to go to shops to buy food and everything. So it's not to say that we can travel much less. I think the normal South African already travel as less as possible due to the high fuel prices. With the recent increase that came into effect at midnight today, we already can expect that disposable income of our consumers will be less. So we do expect that there will be a change in consumption patterns, where consumers move away from the more expensive cuts, for example, in terms of meat, back to the cheaper options like poultry, mincemeat, and those type of cuts. And then obviously, back to staple foods, grain products, for example.
Well, what's happening in Ukraine is affecting oil, that's affecting fuel. It's also been pointed out that both Russia and Ukraine export grain. Just give us a summary of the picture. Of course, it depends when harvesting is, etc. But what grain are we producing? What are we exporting? What are we importing? How could this affect us as South Africa?
Yeah, so if we look at our grains, summer grains, maize, we do export. We produce enough for our local consumption in any case. And we again expect a good crop this year. Current estimates is around 14.5 million tons for maize, which is more than enough for local demand and also for exports. The products that we import is our vegetable oils and also sunflower oil, and more importantly, wheat. And both in wheat and in sunflower, Ukraine and Russia are major important players in the international market. With Ukraine, for example, producing 40% of the sunflower production of the world. So it's really a major player. We do import wheat or wheat from both Russia and Ukraine into South Africa because we are a net importer of wheat. And the wheat then being mixed for our bread. So with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, there's obviously an increase in the international price for those products. And our local products price as being a derivative of the international price, linked with the exchange rate, which also deteriorated due to the conflict. We immediately saw an increase in our local products or local prices for those products.
So what you're saying in terms of maize, we're okay, but not in terms of wheat, bread prices going up, sunflower oil, these are staples for South Africans.
Yes, it's definitely staples, and we do expect increases over the short term in those products. Which is further exacerbated by the increase in the fuel price, because all of those products, or at least 80% of those products, is being transported by road. We must remember that production takes place in rural areas. The raw product, the raw maize, the raw sunflowers is being transported to production facilities, normally around the cities, produced or processed into meal, and then transported back to our rural communities where you see a double impact in terms of the transport cost.
Yeah.
And with the diesel price increase, it's definitely a concern.
So what sort of price increases are we talking about?
It's difficult to say at this stage, but I think we can at least say it will be more than the current inflation that we saw. we already see that food inflation is above the target band of the South African Reserve Bank in the region of 6.5%. And I think in the short term, we will see definitely more percentage more increase than that. So definitely a concern for food price inflation as well.
Yeah, and for the unemployed and even for people whose salaries are remaining stagnant, we know that is something happening across many sectors in South Africa. I saw in some analysis you sent that about 80% of grains are transported by road. So, of course, debate going on about how South Africa should have handled rail transport. We've seen a lot of that being let go. Could it be a very different picture in terms of pricing if trains were being used more widely?
No, definitely. It will definitely have a big impact in the pricing of products when we can transport, especially raw products by train. But unfortunately, I think it will take a number of years to get our rail system back on track to make sure that we can efficiently transport products by rail. Another cost factor on the roadside is the deterioration in the infrastructure in rural areas, which just add to the maintenance costs, for example, for truck companies. So it's a kind of a double whammy for them as well. But I think important to one of the problems that we can solve is to get our rail system back, slowly but surely do that, to make sure that we can optimally use transport by rail to reduce the cost and the cost increases impact on our consumers.
You say there is a silver lining because the retailers will eventually have to come on board to keep their customers and lower their prices, but we don't always know how long that takes.
Yeah, there's always a lag in terms of price decreases when that come into effect. Price increases normally, that's quicker than price decreases. I think retailers are also under pressure. They know the consumer and the situation of the consumer much better than we think they do. So they will definitely absorb some of these increases on their books as well, and they will not necessarily push all the increases onto the consumer.
Yeah. Finally, Mr. Maree, looking at this, any advice for consumers on very tight budgets? How do they find the deals?
Francis, yeah, that's a difficult one. I think shopping around, look where you buy, what you buy. Smart shopping, I think it's important. Now, obviously, don't drive around to do that because of the fuel price. I think also look at alternatives. The alternative products that you can use in your diet. I think more importantly, don't buy food on credit because credit is expensive. And with interest rates increasing, we can expect that it can become more expensive as well. So please don't buy food on credit because long after you've ate that food and consumed everything of it, you're still paying for that.
All right, thank you. Dawie Maree, Head of Information and Marketing at FNB.